Hey everybody, welcome to Ramble and Mosey, which is our preferred way to stroll through nature and everybody's favorite podcast. A little bit of housekeeping before we launch into today's episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Ramble and Mosey on your favorite podcast channels, whether Spotify, Apple iTunes, or elsewhere. And if you like what you're hearing, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. The algorithms love those likes. So whether it's this episode or others, if you hear something that's been important to you or impactful, make sure to share it with others and give it that big thumbs up. Today, we've got a couple of guests who, along with myself, are going to well represent a breadth of generations, as well as perspectives on the outdoors. Laughing a little bit as I'm saying that, because if anything else, we're probably going to overgeneralize specific generational viewpoints on the outdoors. But we say that in advance, knowing so. So I want to introduce you today to Qing, Tiffany, and Dan Cooke, both coming from us from Metro Detroit, from the Detroit region. And we'll talk a little bit about why that terminology is important, as well as some of the initiatives that both Qing and Dan are working on. Qing, Dan, welcome. How you guys doing?
Good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Doing fantastic. Happy to be here.
Right on. So the other day, I was reminded that the thing to do, it never made you cool, but the thing to do used to be to Google yourself and see what results came up.
Oh, geez.
So apparently the new thing to do is to chat GPT yourself, like ask chat GPT who this person is. So of course I tried it. And what came back was no known celebrity of that name, which I thought was both humiliating, but also pretty appropriate. So Qing, if we ask chat GPT who Qing Tiffany is, definitely some celebrity status in here. What would ChatGPT tell us? Who would ChatGPT tell us Qing Tiffany is?
Well, probably no searches. No, well, I honestly haven't been in this space for very long. Most of you guys know, I was on track to go to medical school. I did pre-med all throughout college and was basically going to go to medical school up until a few years ago. And so honestly, if anything were to come up, it would be all that stuff. But I started a sustainability blog during COVID. I felt really alone. And so I thought the best thing to do was to try and advocate for the outdoors during that time when was so secluded. And I started to fall in love with it. And I reached out to Kristen Myers, who used to work at Six Rivers, and she said that there was a job opportunity at Six Rivers Land Conservancy. And I ended up interning there for a few years, and the rest is history. Now I've completely changed my career. I've made a big lifestyle change as well, and I haven't looked back.
Right on. Dan, how about you? What would ChatGPT tell us your celebrity is?
ChatGPT would say that Dan was a big law lawyer for the first, let's say 10 years of his career, and then did a pretty abrupt change into the outdoor industry. Below the surface, I would say it's been a lot more of an intentional transition. I still am a practicing attorney in venture capital and business law. But even towards the end of my time in practicing law full time, I started working more with clients that were branching into the outdoor space in kind of that outdoor renaissance that happened towards the end of 2020, when people could actually get outside during COVID and realized not only is this one of the few places where people can actually go, but there's a lot of opportunity. And there's a lot of opportunity from an entrepreneurial business and really advocacy perspective. That's from law that took me into launching Expedition Detroit, getting more into the active business and really innovative side. And from there, a lot of opportunities have ensued, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
I like that the thread between both of those obviously is some change and some iteration, right? Like there's no static identity. Qing, you mentioned Six Rivers Land Conservancy. For those that aren't familiar, tell us a little bit more about Six Rivers, and then I think more importantly, also tell us what you're doing now, because you said you made a shift.
Yeah, so I interned there for about a year, and then ended up joining the staff mostly full time, and was there for a few years. And then when I left the organization to join my new position in the new organization, Make Food Not Waste, I was asked to be on the board, which is a big change, obviously going from staff to board. But it was really exciting, and I'm glad that they still had, still valued me and my perspective to ask me to join.
And I know Six Rivers is housed out of Rochester, is that correct?
Yes, it is in Rochester, Oakland Township area, but we serve 5 different counties in the Southeast region.
Okay, right on. And then Dan, you mentioned, to kind of dive into it a little bit, I guess you mentioned some of your VC and your finance background.
Yeah.
We had a chance to talk off mic a little bit about investing in Detroit from kind of a VC perspective. Wonder if maybe you could share how that thought process started you with Expedition Detroit, but also the why part of it.
Yeah. So as I was carefully plotting my escape from big law, before even going to law school, I as we talked about, I worked in venture capital where, investing 101 is buy low, sell high. You're looking for undervalued assets to put some capital, some money, some resources behind to watch them grow. And then in the VC world, obviously, you're looking for a financial return. So as I was looking to leave law, I knew I wanted to do something in the outdoor space, but I didn't know whether that be start a venture capital fund, only focusing on outdoor companies that are in the Detroit area or in Michigan, or have some sort of correlation or alignment with the outdoors, with the sustainable outdoor industry. And as I thought more about growing the fund, what led me to start Expedition Detroit is realizing that, as I was looking into the outdoor ecosystem and what opportunities were there in, 2021 early on, I saw a lot of disparate businesses and organizations, whether it was a ski gear manufacturer that was in their own little silo, or a mountain biking community that was in their silo, but not a lot of connection in the aggregate between all of these different individual players or groups or industries, which I thought, in that buy low, sell high, like that was the opportunity, is that there wasn't really any singular, like innovative force that was really tying in the whole outdoor recreation industry in the Detroit area together. That was really connecting all the dots between the skiers and the hunters and the hikers and the kayakers. And so going back to that investment mindset, at a certain point, the light bulb went off where it's like, oh, Detroit's outdoor industry, from its individual manufacturers, from its destinations, from its resources, from its opportunities, people aren't viewing Detroit, or really Southeast Michigan as a whole, as a world-class outdoor destination. That's the opportunity. That's the undervalued asset that if we grow, like, yes, there will be financial success, but more so there will be conservation of natural resources, expansion of opportunities, new demographics getting in the mix. So that baseline view of Detroit's outdoors being its most undervalued asset, that's really what changed the entire trajectory of my career, and ended up launching Expedition Detroit.
And there's a small team behind Expedition Detroit, right? Correct. I mean, you co-founded, but you're not in the back cleaning bathrooms and and typing at the same time.
Yeah, there is a small team, but the key word is small. We're a few people here and there. I would say that I am everything that from the CEO to the janitor at this point, but we do have writers that contribute interstitiously. We have one guide that's on, a few more that we're looking to onboard as we grow, especially over 2025. We're looking to hire a new chief operations officer to manage more of the pipeline and leads and internal processes. A team at Expedition Detroit, that's definitely one of our goals, because there is so much opportunity in this region and in this space that having one person being the main person turning the wheels is just not, it's not sustainable. It's not good for the company. And in my humble opinion, isn't good for the industry. We need more people, more voices, more perspectives getting involved.
I don't think there's anyone and certainly in the nonprofit sector who wouldn't empathize with being the janitor as well as the chief writer and the executive director and so on. It's pretty typical. For our purposes, we're just going to keep assuming that being a lawyer is your side hustle and Expedition Detroit is the day job.
Amen to that.
Qing, tell us a little bit more about Make Food Not Waste. So as part of your transition from staff to board member at Six Rivers Land Conservancy, that was also a result of you taking on a new role with Make Food Not Waste. What's the geography there, and what's the tie to the outdoors?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit organization. We are based in the city of Detroit. What we do is essentially provide solutions to food waste. When we throw away food and it sits in a landfill, it doesn't fully decompose, and so it creates methane gas. And so a lot of the solutions that we've created is creating upcycling kitchens in the city of Detroit. So we actually have one on the east side, one on the west side, and then we also are working on an infrastructure plan with the state of Michigan, specifically with Eagle, to actually try to cut food waste in half by 2030. So we're kind of working on a twofold system right now where presently we can, in terms of the current food waste problem, the kitchens are the solution, but long term that won't solve the food waste problem. So that's why we're looking more to the future and saying, what can we do to actually create systemic change and allow food waste to go to the right places it needs to go to.
Qing, I'm curious where the waste itself, where is that being sourced from, or how does that enter the chain?
So it's the food system is it's circular, right? But it's actually very linear, so it doesn't, we can get our food easily, but there's significant waste at all steps of the food system. It's at the farms, it's at the grocery stores, on the consumer level, a restaurant level. And so a lot of the food that we receive is all surplus food from grocery stores, and it's food that can't really necessarily go to food pantries. So it's brown bananas, for example. No one's going to buy them at the grocery store. The food pantries won't take them. So our bananas that we receive end up going into banana bread. And then those go to feed community members. So it's all sorts of really innovative, really cool things that our chefs are able to do with the random things we get. It's chopped every single week.
Nice. Very cool. I did notice, and I do it all the time, that the three of us so far even have code switched a few times between Metro Detroit, City of Detroit, the Detroit region, Southeast Michigan. I think the three of us use those pretty interchangeably often. Certainly not everyone does, and others I think have a much more specific reason they might identify as being from Metro Detroit versus Detroit, or from Southeast Michigan. I'm curious how each of you define where you work, and then maybe a little bit about why you frame it that way. Dan, if you wouldn't mind, maybe kind of kick us off in that thinking, like, what is Detroit, as I'm waving my hands around this imaginary map?
Yeah. Detroit is very multidimensional, and that, not only from a purely geographic terminology, but also, the ethnographics within the city. That was something that became really apparent to me when I was in law school. I went to Wayne State for law. So kind of the idea of, as we were working with different startups through the business and community law clinic, of, what did it mean to be from Detroit? And I would say people from Detroit proper, that means something very different from if you're in, potentially Brighton or Grosse Pointe or Northville or Auburn Hills. For us as a platform, we use the term the Detroit region, which across all of our articles on our web pages, we really try and reiterate very intentionally. And our company's definition of the Detroit region is anywhere where you can get to in a car within an hour's drive from Campus Martius, the heart of downtown Detroit. So it's not a perfect, circle or semicircle around the city. It's in some areas where there's more accessibility. That is part of the Detroit region. It also includes, and this is something that I love to tell people, especially from outside of Michigan and the Great Lakes, when they ask about, what our scope of operations is. The Detroit region also includes Canada. And especially when we've done some features on not only Windsor, but Point Pelee National Park, on Amherstburg, Ontario, on different gravel biking and other outdoor recreation events in southwestern Ontario. When you go over there, they very much view themselves as having a similar recreational identity as we do in Southeast Michigan. I think it's mostly Michiganders. So they're Canadians. This is Detroit. But if you go over to Amherstburg, especially when we've posted content highlighting them, that's been some of the most fertile ground for web growth because they view themselves as having that identity as being part of the Detroit region. So for us, we really try and define what it means to be in the Detroit region via what is accessible for your, really your core downtown Detroiter, where they could get off of work and be at a trailhead in half an hour. As far as the, ethno identities behind that, that is, you could write a PhD dissertation about what it means to be a Detroiter versus a Metro Detroiter. But we really try and define it as geographic accessibility from the heart of downtown.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think, I ran into some folks from Lake Tahoe actually fairly recently, and they kept talking about how they would always bounce through Detroit on their way back home. And what that led to was us looking at a map of the metropolitan region and then frankly also the binational region. And they were sort of chuckling and they're like, you told us that you could drive south to get to Canada and we thought you were crazy. And it's like, no, actually you really can. It's one of the few spots you can. And it's part of that same environmental region, same recreation region. So I think we think about it differently than say, perhaps like traditional transportation planning might or traditional economic development where it's a much more fluid space for sure. Qing, when you're thinking about Detroit, Metro Detroit, Southeast Michigan, what words do you usually use?
I think it depends. I live in Auburn Hills, so I will say Metro Detroit area when I'm talking about where I live. But I know that the people that live in the city of Detroit and that are true Detroiters liked the specificity of where you are from in Detroit. So if you're even a little out of Detroit, Hamtramck, you're not a Detroiter. So I like to say Southeast Michigan region. But I mean, where I work every single day is really very much in the city. It's right on Jefferson Ave, really close to Belle Isle, actually. So, I say I work in the city, but the region nearby and all the cities nearby, that's Metro Detroit to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some of our prior guests, Sigal Hemi and Alex Allen from the Detroit Parks Coalition, talked a little bit about that last comment you made, which is that for so long, things had been done to the residents of Detroit. And so one of their offerings was that the feeling of insiders, outsiders comes a lot from that idea that if you do something with people, that means one thing. If you do something to people, obviously that means something very different. So a lot of that identity, the everybody against Detroit or Detroit versus everybody sort of concept does come, unfortunately, from some historical actions, but I think also gets changed and broached and evolved from a lot of the work that all of us do. With that in mind as well, I kind of started this off by saying that we're proudly and unfortunately going to probably stereotype generations and sort of cultural approaches. When we're talking about the Detroit region, what does that look like ethnically? What does that look like demographically?
It's complicated and it's changing. It's very dynamic. I think when it comes to Detroit proper, the city, I think the work that Dan Gilbert especially did, starting off about 10 years ago, of really intentionally bringing a lot of, my generation, millennial employees into the city through incentives, getting a lot of, tax breaks, really changed the core of downtown. So downtown Detroit, Midtown, kind of the downtown adjacent neighborhoods of the city, changed very quickly. And you had a lot more of that kind of, as older generations would call, like yuppie, spirit coming in, a lot more trendy, bars, more expensive places. So while on one hand, you've had a lot of change very quickly in some sections of Detroit, you've also had a lot of, not necessarily the same, but the same legacy groups that have continued to innovate and continue to build and thrive in their own neighborhoods, in their own capacities, entirely separate of the rest of the city. And that's just Detroit proper. You've had, especially over the last decade, a lot of different ethnic groups either further define and build out their insular communities, or you've had new groups come in. For example, the Yemeni community in Hamtramck has fundamentally changed what was traditionally a Polish neighborhood. The national attention that's been shown on Dearborn, getting outside of the city, and just a lot of Novi has a very sizable Japanese population. You're having all these demographics come in, which for us at Expedition Detroit has been really exciting, because for the outdoor state to thrive, it needs to grow. And all of these different, neighborhood changes, all of these different cultural groups that have come into the Detroit region and really made their own new impression on it, has provided opportunity for something different. For example, the Japanese community in Novi, the idea of forest bathing and just getting out into green space as a means to handle, everyday work-life stress, that concept originated in Japan. So you're seeing a lot more of that demographic accessing, Novi, Oakland County parks, Mayberry State Park in Northfield, different outdoor outlets there. In Detroit proper, with the new Greenways expansion, you're getting more, Black neighborhoods, Mexican, as these, trails are being built through their communities that for a long time were kind of isolated from the rest of downtown. You're getting more interconnection. You're getting more shared ideas. You're getting more stakeholder engagement. And as these trail systems continue to be built out, my hope is that you'll continue to see that engagement foster new connections and new outdoor identities within these very diverse communities. It's really exciting.
We had, I mentioned Sigal Hemi, and one of the pieces of research that the Detroit Parks Coalition had done over the last couple of years was looking at the movement patterns of communities in the Detroit region, and where people were, where they started from and where they ended up in terms of their conservation activities and their recreation, their outdoor recreation. And the flow is becoming much more fluid than it historically was, both in and out of the city, but at the same time also intra-city, intra-suburban regions. I think we're seeing some pretty dynamic stuff happening. Qing, you very rightfully at one point accused me of being basic, which I'll take that amongst many other badges. But where that comment came from was the question that we often ask people of what their outdoor identity is. And you'd shared a story with me about sort of the anti-outdoorsy story, that just because you climb a mountain doesn't mean you're outdoorsy. I'm wondering if you could maybe share that with us.
Yeah, no, I was talking to Jonathan previously about, he asked me, well, first of all, he asked me what my outdoor identity was. And I hate that question because it's, fluid and it's always changing. And what is considered traditionally outdoorsy? And I was like, well, I really don't know, because we spoke about what outdoor identity is. And I was remembering a time when I lived in China, and we had an apartment complex that was really embedded in the mountains, actually. And so there were always these little old women that would do Tai Chi every morning at 6:30 and then would climb the mountain behind this giant apartment complex. And I don't think that they would consider themselves outdoorsy people. That's just embedded in the culture and very much similar to forest bathing and how people are reflecting on themselves and the outdoors in that experience. I think, Chinese people do it similarly, but, that's something that they do all the time, and they wouldn't consider themselves, traditionally outdoorsy. But it's interesting to talk about how your outdoor identity has changed, because I know mine has. Just in the past year or two, what I would have said in response to that question has definitely changed significantly. And what I would consider myself, or what my outdoor identity used to be, is not the same as it is now.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. I think that's also emblematic of Michigan as a whole, where we have and this isn't a new idea, but we have a concept of who we are in the outdoors. We have a concept of what conservation is. We have a concept of what outdoor recreation is. And until something happens that challenges that assumption or challenges that expectation, we really do kind of get stuck in a rut. Again, I'm sort of quipping before 3 generations. You've got Gen X, Gen Z, Millennial, sort of having a conversation around the outdoors. But at the same time, the differences in how we approach the work that we do, as well as the spaces themselves, really do tend to be unified by this idea that there's no one right way to be outside. There's no one right way to be outdoors. And I think it's when we start to get into those assumptions. You're not core enough. You're not pure enough. You're not X, Y, and Z enough. Who cares? Who the hell cares? Are you having fun, and are you taking care of the places that you love at the same time? Dan, Expedition Detroit is at its core a very simple concept, but as you've already shared with us, there's lots of moving pieces from the actual programming itself to what I think of as the media side to the business side, things like that. If you're willing, share with us a little bit about how, from a kind of a business practice, how things got pieced together. And then again, you've talked a little bit about how you want it to grow, but sort of what's next, what's success look like for Expedition Detroit?
Yeah. As far as Expedition Detroit's growth from like a business enterprise perspective, when we first launched, the idea was we don't really know how to monetize this yet. But I mean, there's lots of ways we could potentially, whether that's turning into a subscription platform or doing, sponsored content or, just getting Google ads, running on the website. But the idea was let's just build the resource. Let's build the resource that our team wish existed for the Detroit area, getting all the trails, all this commentary, all of the, best gear partners, advocacy, keeping our ear to the ground on what regulations are in place that could either empower or impact outdoor recreation near Detroit. Let's just build this one-stop shop for all matters outdoor rec in the Detroit area. And that got us along a little bit. That got us off the ground. That at least provided a platform that we could present to the world of, hey, here's who we are. From that, we then gravitated a lot more towards the guided experience. So Expedition Detroit, as far as just a business, planning and growing platform, has really been a result of just constant communication and seeking constant feedback from our community of where we could best meet their needs. And to Qing, what you were saying about, outdoor identities, changing and morphing with different lifestyles, a lot of our core constituency are, mostly women from, non-white backgrounds that have felt for the long time that they didn't have a place in the outdoors. And now they've found Expedition Detroit and have seen, our content, our accessibility, our gear guides, whatever, as that bridge of being like, oh, the outdoors are for me. Me and who I am, I can be at a trailhead in 20 minutes and start hiking. And as we've interacted with other communities, our business plan has sharpened even more so of just trying to get people outside and trying to get them engaging with the outdoors and being that bridge to do so. Our business plan will continue to form in conjunction with our community and what the Detroit region's outdoor needs are, whether that's new services, new gear, new content. As we get that feedback, we'll continue defining who we are and what value we provide to this community.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that is the smart combination of the service-based model with also evolving based on what the customer base is interested in, right? It's not we're going to sell you a product, and if you don't want to buy it, too bad. We're going to keep selling it to you, so to speak. You mentioned the Michigan DNR. Who are some of the other partners you are working with, and who do you want to work with? Give them a shout out.
We really just want to do more in the state park system because there's a lot of opportunity there. I think the largest partner that we haven't been able to really align with, and this may sound surprising, is Detroit, like the Detroit Parks and Rec. I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in places like Rouge Park and other inner Detroit city parks, of just getting people out there. Next year, especially with the launch of the Gordie Howe Bridge, an idea I have, and this is my first time vocalizing it in any sort of public medium, so you're welcome, it would be leading guided cycle tours from Milliken State Park, so still utilizing our licensure with the DNR, over the Gordie Howe Bridge, which will have cycling lanes, and into Canada to access the Trans-Canada Trail along the Windsor Riverfront. We really want to move into those spaces, not only to shine a spotlight on the opportunities they have there or that are there, but also to really just continue to unite this region under one outdoor banner. But to do so, we need to work more with Detroit Parks and Rec. So that is the next key target partner that we would love to work with in the coming years.
Yeah, I think all of us will have a chance based on what, again, I keep referencing Segal and Alex, but based on what we're hearing from our nonprofit partners, City Services, City Parks and Rec finally has some juice behind it again. And so my hope, and I know a number of others, is that there'll be increased opportunities for those kinds of partnerships in a little bit more accessible sort of a government structure as well. Mm-hmm. Super wonky, but they were very defensive for a long time based on just trying not to be squashed. So I think there's a lot in store and a lot ahead for them as well. Sign me up for the International Bike Tour. If nobody else comes, I'll be the first one there for sure. That sounds amazing.
I love it. Yeah, that'll be fun.
One of the other things that I think we're challenged with is the large number of barriers that exist for minority communities, especially in the Detroit region. And this is true in Grand Rapids as well, and Saginaw, and Flint, and Lansing, but it really gets amplified, I think, in the Detroit region. What barriers do you see that are sort of most pressing? And are there some that perhaps are that we can knock down a little bit faster?
The Great Migration that happened in the 1900s brought a lot of communities of color to Detroit. But many of those communities were situated in those polluted spaces around highways and factories. And, that has a lot to do with redlining and land disposition, and that's a whole nother topic. So traditionally, people of color really haven't had access to those spaces and interact with those spaces the way that we would have. And I think that there has been this shift, especially now where I've noticed communities are really reclaiming these spaces, doing what they want with them in the best way that they see fit. So like these vacant lots and these parks are now being turned into spaces where people of color feel comfortable going. And in the food system space, I've noticed some of those spaces are now being turned into educational programs for food sovereignty. And that's another way to even get out into the outdoor space that we don't really think about, is actually, growing your own food, putting your hands in the soil and watching where our food comes from right at home. But that's one really amazing thing I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think we've heard, I'm repeating what I learned. So I'll hopefully repeat it correctly and accurately. But thinking about generations, especially post-World War II generations, moving from southern states into the Great Lakes states and Michigan in particular for automotive industry jobs. And I think the most powerful thing I heard from a number of individuals was that grandma and grandpa spent a lot of time and money and energy and personal sweat and strife and grief to find a better place for us. And in some cases that meant moving out of the outdoors, moving out of the dirt, to be able to craft a better life and a different life. That, I think, in combination with some of the views, frankly, about what it costs to be in the outdoors. I have to go somewhere. I have to buy a lot of gear. I have to do these things the way that the industry tells me that I need to buy them. I think those two things have created an atmosphere that it's taken us a while to start to break down. In addition to leaving Milliken Park to go to Pinckney, Dan, you're talking about what's outside your door, quite literally. Qing, you're talking about finding the spaces and places that are important to local community members, not just creating new spaces that are meant to be invitational, but they don't necessarily reflect where people have historically put themselves. So I think there's a lot of good intent, mostly good intent, and a lot of trial and error in terms of changing these perspectives and also the places people get to visit.
And I honestly come from more so the community engagement perspective. So, how do we engage people with our mission? How do we get them to care? And honestly, meeting people where they're at is the best thing that you can do, because we're not going to resonate with people if, they don't care about it. So if I do say, how are people going to speak loudly for the places that they love if they don't even know these places even exist or have a connection with them? So
bingo. No, that's our operating model to a T. Like you just summed up our whole business strategy is, people don't care about what they don't know. And for so long, the identity of the Detroit region was that this is a place where you could go to find a job in the auto industry. This is where you could go if you want to have a car dependent life. This is where, but not where you want to go if you want to live a world-class outdoor recreational experience. If you want that, you've got to live at a bare minimum up north or, around, Traverse City, Charlevoix, Boyne, that area. And better yet, you got to move out west. You got to be in Colorado. You got to be in Montana. You got to be in Utah. And it just led to, at least from what we've seen across our research, just such a degradation of our natural resources and our natural ecosystem as a whole, to the point where, from a private sector perspective, and I'm sure, you guys from public, you're trying to get people to care, and they're like, about what? What's even here? What's here to care about? At best, you get kind of an obnoxious debate where you have to, advocate for all of the good resources that are in, this part of the state and this part of the country. At worst, you have pollution run rampant because there are no environmental protections in place because the voting constituency doesn't care enough to protect it because they don't know it's there. Like literally right when we launched, the Huron River was shut down for a few months because of, PFAS that were, and other chemicals that were leaked from a plant in Wixom. It just highlights more so, the issues that if you don't change the identity of how we view our natural resources, but B, also how we view ourselves as outdoor people, you're not going to get them to care about your land conservancy or your mom and pop, ski shop on the corner. or your state park or your local park or your community driven farm or whatever sustainable natural resource you're trying to preserve.
I want to turn just for a couple of minutes, if I can. Both of you are what I think of as communication experts. Qing, you reference yourself as a community engagement specialist, and obviously the promotion side. So from my simplistic view, those both fall into the communications bucket. We also had a conversation not too recently about cowboy emojis, which led me down the path of a deep dive, quite frankly, into understanding what the heck, why I would use a cowboy emoji in any conversation I ever had. But what it really sort of illuminated for me is both the language and then also the tools that are used to communicate. So again, kind of from a practical perspective, what are your go-to tools to communicate your work, as well as those places that you just so passionately talked about?
I think social media has been really great. It's such a great tool. When I was at the tail end, right before I left Six Rivers, we started Trail Tales. So the very first 2 videos that were made with Ian were with me, and I had to kind of advocate to start sharing some more reels on social media just so we could reach a different demographic. But it's honestly a really powerful tool. Albeit not the most, helpful sometimes. It does have its cons and its negatives, but, overall, it's a great way to reach, especially the younger generation. It's great to be able to share it so quickly. The algorithm is so wonky, but it can reach a lot of people. And it's so easy now to be able to just send it to a person and say, hey, look at this cool trail I checked out, and just share it to them, and then they can go check it out.
So for Expedition Detroit, obviously you're trying to reach a breadth and depth of audience. What tools seem to be working, or is it all of them?
The cop-out answer is that it's all of them. If you have any sort of competency in a medium or a media tool, I think in today's digital environment where you're constantly competing for eyeballs and attention, you've got to use whatever's at your disposal. I've tried to utilize as authentic of a voice as possible, which I don't think not only is, just good marketing ethics or approach, but I think it is, especially in an area like Detroit that's so based on, grit and authenticity. And if, for lack of a better term, if you're full of bullshit, it's going to be called out immediately in the Detroit region. People just don't put up with it. They can smell, fake, inauthentic glitz a mile away.
Yeah, well put. I mean, it's that, and I think that's a good umbrella for almost the entirety of our conversation today, which is that authenticity and being approachable and appropriate are the ways to get more folks engaged in the places that we love. Sounds really simplistic, but I think that's also the thing that, especially from the nonprofit sector, doesn't happen as well and as often as it should. So take us out today, guys. Someone lands at Detroit Metro Airport. They've never been here before. They have 1 hour to spend outside somewhere, not including travel time. Where would you send them to?
For me, it's Belle Isle. You get the kind of a microcosm of the entire region in one 984 acre island. You've got, beautiful views of downtown and the Detroit River. You've got stunning architecture. All of Detroit's world famous architects also built structures on Belle Isle. And if you go to the far eastern edge of Belle Isle, near where the lighthouse is, you also get a taste of the our natural environment. It's a 2.2 mile trail network, which is actually where the Iron Bell Trail starts, right there, the William Livingstone Lighthouse. So you get to take them into nature in an area that was designated by Frederick Law Olmsted 100 years ago as a wilderness area. So you get the river Oh, and Canada is also a stone throw away. So you kind of get that feel of the binational nature of the Detroit region. So you get both countries, you get downtown city views, you get the architecture, you get the parks, and then you also get the wilderness. That's my answer.
Qing, they've got 1 hour. Where do they go?
I don't know if this is basic, but my new favorite park is actually Innovation Hills in Rochester. The park itself has a bunch of different trails, and it actually has a giant playground. There's multiple trails lining the Clinton River that have been made kind of by people, just individuals walking along it. I'm not actually sure if you're 100% allowed to go back there, but I do. And it's probably one of my favorite places. I've been going there quite a lot and just do the full loop. It's about an hour.
Well, Dan and Qing, thank you for your time today. Thanks for your insights. Thanks for your hot tips on both how to talk to folks and how to work with them and where to go. Look forward to seeing for sure the evolution of Expedition Detroit as it continues to grow. I know for all of us, it's become a go-to resource without blowing too much smoke your way. I mean, it's really, really grown both in terms of visibility and also readership that folks are running into. And Qing, your work with Six Rivers and Make Food Not Waste obviously continues to help the region grow and be more sustainable, from that sustainability blog to doing the work. That evolution is very evident there as well. As always, a reminder that Ramble and Mosey is sponsored by the C.S. Mott Foundation with additional support from the Conservation Fund. Production by Anna Moya. Thought leadership by Parallel Solutions. I'm your host, Jonathan Jaros. Hope you enjoyed today's episode and look forward to catching you again soon.